A Russian Progress cargo craft docked at the International Space Station on Saturday to deliver food, fuel and supplies. The ISS is one of the few international projects on which the United States and Russia still cooperate closely. In December, Roscosmos said that a cross-flight program with NASA to the ISS had been extended until 2025. Relations in other areas between the two countries have broken down since Russia's invasion of Ukraine nearly 2 years ago, to which Washington responded by sending arms to Kyiv and imposing successive rounds of sanctions on Moscow. The fiercest domestic critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin is reported to have died in one of the world's harshest penal colonies. 47-year-old Alexei Navalny was convicted of fraud and extremism. Authorities of the infamous Arctic Russian prison dubbed the Polar Wolf. They say they are investigating the Putin's critic's death. Reports of his death inside the Russian prison have sparked anti-Putin protests worldwide. Supporters say the fiery opposition politician was systematically persecuted for challenging Putin. Prison authorities said in a statement that Navalny felt unwell after a walk. He lost consciousness almost immediately and died shortly afterwards, adding that resuscitation attempts failed. France and Ukraine signed a bilateral security pact on February 16th, which includes pledges from Paris to deliver more arms, train soldiers, and send up to $3.24 billion as military aid to Kyiv to help the country in its war against Russia. The accord, signed by the French President Emmanuel Macron and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky. In the agreement, which followed similar deals Kyiv has reached with Britain and Germany, France also pledges to provide more military equipment, particularly for air defense. Macron said Russian President Putin should urgently provide explanations about reports on planned nuclear arms activities in space. Amid Putin critic Alexei Navalny's death sparking an international row, Ukrainian troops in Avdiivka have withdrawn as Russian forces tighten the noose around the strategic eastern city. This comes as the war closes to a second anniversary on February 24th of Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The 4-month battle in Avdiivka came as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made another trip to Europe. Zelensky signed a new long-term security pact with France after securing a similar deal and aid from Germany. His visit came amid the news of the death of Putin critic Alexei Navalny.
Россия без Путина! Россия без Путина! Россия без Путина!
Protesters gathered in front of the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C. on Friday, February 16th to express their outrage and sadness over the death of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Many protesters held signs critical of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who many blame for the Russian opposition leader's death. 47-year-old Alexei Navalny was convicted of fraud and extremism. Authorities of the infamous Arctic Russian prison dubbed the Polar Wolf. They say they are investigating the Putin's critic's death. Prison authorities said in a statement that Navalny felt unwell after a walk. He lost consciousness almost immediately and died shortly afterwards, adding that resuscitation attempts failed. As America's presidential race to power heats up, former US President and Republican frontrunner Donald Trump faced another setback. Trump has been fined $355 million over fraud allegations and banned from running business in New York for 3 years. Former President Trump has called the court judge crooked and said he will be appealing the decision. Trump turned the ruling a witch hunt in order to prevent him to assume the president's office again. Notably, Donald Trump has also been barred from serving as an officer or director of any New York-based corporation for 3 years or from getting a loan from banks registered in the state. The executive vice president of Trump's organization, Donald Trump Jr., and Eric Trump each were ordered to pay $4 million as penalties. An explosion possibly caused by a gas leak engulfed a home in Virginia on Friday night, killing a firefighter and injuring 11 other people. The blast and fire occurred while firefighters were inside the building. According to the rescue authorities, 9 firefighters and 2 civilians have been taken to the hospital with injuries ranging from limited to severe. The cause of fire is yet to be known and the investigation is underway. Migrant rights advocates in the US state of Texas are trying to block a bill that grants state police the power to arrest and deport anyone suspected of entering Texas illegally. Republican state lawmakers say that the bill will help protect Texas from the influx of migrants. The US Justice Department argues that the federal law, rather than the state decisions, dictates immigration policy. Campaigners are arguing that the bill would lead to racial discrimination and could impact millions of people who are living legally in the state. Now, a wave of illegal border crossings in recent months has made migration a key talking point in the US presidential election campaign, with Republicans seeking to pin the blame for the record high numbers entirely on Democratic President Biden. Some of Hungary's best-known online personalities led a crowd of at least 10,000 protesters in Budapest against Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government. This after a sex abuse case pardoned by President Katalin Novak caused public uproar and led to her resignation. Demonstrators filled the Hungarian capital's sprawling Heroes Square and called for genuine reforms to Hungary's child protection system and for a transformation in Orban's system of governance. Now, Orban, who has been in power since 2010, has sought to defuse the week-old scandal that brought down two of his key political allies. Who are the president and the former Justice Minister, Judith Varga? The 60th Munich Security Conference is underway in Germany. Global tensions, especially wars in Ukraine and West Asia, are among some of the biggest concerns that are dominating this year's agenda. Senior US, Arab and European officials met on Friday at the conference sidelines to discuss a plan for post-war Gaza. It also focuses on normalizing ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan, and Foreign Ministers of Jordan, Qatar, Germany, Britain, France and Italy were a part of the pool. The talks also tabled the pathway towards a Palestinian state and the required reforms in its authorities. The International Court of Justice has rejected South Africa's request to pressure Tel Aviv to safeguard Palestinians that are being threatened by its ground assault in Rafah. The ICJ upheld its last ruling, demanding Israel to stop striking civilian targets. Now, this comes after South Africa lodged an urgent request asking the UN top court to check whether Israel was breaching the provisional orders handed to it by the court in a case alleging the Israeli forces of genocide in the Gaza Strip. The court also ruled against providing additional emergency measures to protect the rights of Palestinians. Thousands of Houthi supporters took to the streets of Sana'a in Yemen to show their support for Palestinians in Gaza on February 16. The demonstrators, holding huge Palestinian flags, signs and some with rifles chanting slogans. The Houthis, who control Yemen's capital and most populous areas, have targeted international shipping lane in the Red Sea, calling it a show of solidarity with the Palestinians against Israel, drawing US and British retaliatory strikes since last month. Washington announced last month that Houthi rebels would return to a list of terrorist groups, which will hit the Iran-affiliated groups and militias with harsh sanctions. The Indian Space Agency is all set to launch its latest weather satellite, the GSLV F-14 or the INSAT 3DS. Well, it is a mission from India's Sriharikota today at 5:35 p.m. local time. Ahead of today's awaited launch, ISRO's chief S. Somnath offered prayers at the Sri Chengalamma temple in India's Andhra Pradesh. As per ISRO, this will be GSLV rocket's 16th mission, in which it will deploy the INSAT 3DS meteorological satellite into the geosynchronous transfer orbit. The new satellite also boasts a search and rescue transponder that can help tap and locate distress calls from special equipments. These equipments are commonly found in ships. As of now, India has 3 active weather satellite systems, including INSAT 3D, INSAT 3DR and OceanSat. The second round of farmers' protest that has entered its 5th day near India's capital, Delhi. Now, as the situation continues to remain tense in the areas bordering Delhi, The march, dubbed as Delhi Chalo or Let's Go to Delhi, began on the 13th of February. The epicenter of the ongoing farm agitation is at Delhi's Shambhu border. Thousands of farmers have been protesting against the central government here. Significantly, 3 rounds of talks between farm unions and the government have failed, and the 4th round has now been scheduled for 5 p.m. on Sunday. 2 casualties have been reported so far. 1 Haryana Railway Police personnel and 1 protesting farmer have died. A missile launched from Yemen has hit a Panamanian flagged tanker named MT Pollux in the Red Sea. According to the US State Department, the tanker was carrying crude oil to India. According to the LSEG data, MT Pollux embarked from Russia's Black Sea port city of Novorossiysk on January 24th and was due to discharged in Paradip in the eastern Indian state of Odisha on February 28th. The Indian Oil Company has 300,000 barrels per day oil refinery at Paradip. The ship is owned by Oceanfront Maritime Company and managed by Sea Trade Marine. Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis have said they will press on with attacks on Red Sea shipping in solidarity with the Palestinians. Now, the attacks on ships have disrupted global commerce, stoked fears of inflation, and deepened concern the Israel-Hamas war could spread. Mass protests have erupted just days after the National Assembly elections. Thousands of supporters of the Grand Democratic Alliance, or the GDA, have hit the streets in the southern Sindh province over the alleged rigging in elections. In Jamshoro, leaders and supporters of the GDA staged a sit-in protest and blocked the Hyderabad-Jamshoro interchange, demanding free and fair results of the recently held elections in Pakistan. In the latest, Imran Khan's party PTI has called on its cadres and supporters to prepare for a historic and peaceful protest in Islamabad against alleged rigging in the recently concluded assembly elections. Counter-terrorism department personnel have also been deployed to deal with any emergency ahead of PTI's protests. Japan's space agency launched a second test model of its new flagship rocket H-3 on Saturday. The launch comes after 1 year after the first failed attempt due to engine ignition trouble. The Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, and primary contractor Mitsubishi Heavy Industries plan for the H-3 to replace the 2-decade-old HIIA rocket. The rocket will fly about 2 hours and then release 2 microsatellites and a dummy mass-stimulating, a satellite payload. Jailed former Thai Premier Thaksin Shinawatra will be released on February 18th. Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin said on Saturday. Now, Thaksin has been in hospital detention since August after making a dramatic homecoming from living abroad for 15 years in self-exile to avoid prison for a conflict of interest. He had his 8-year jail term commuted to a year by the king after his return and has served 6 months in the hospital detention due to an undisclosed health condition. A former policeman and telecoms magnate who has been at the center of a tumultuous 2-year battle for power in Thailand, Thaksin was on a list of 930 prisoners who were considered elderly or ill and approved for parole. This according to media reports.